Kevin Martin was born and raised in Virginia and had no particular interest in politics as a child. Following in the footsteps of several members of his family who had pursued scientific endeavors, he enrolled at the University of Virginia and took a course in pre-medicine to eventually work in the medical field. Kevin had a heart for service and wanted to help make a difference in people's lives. He did not pursue medicine though, and earned a bachelor's degree in psychology. After college, Kevin stayed with his grandparents. Kevin did a few different things, ran a movie theater, and worked in the restaurant industry until he got into the oil and gas industry. Those early experiences taught him a lot about people. Everywhere that Kevin had been, he always wanted to do his best and see what he could learn from the experience that had been put before him. How did he transition to become a lobbyist? What does he like most in his current role as a lobbyist? These are some of the questions Kevin Martin will answer as he shares his journey in this new episode of State Lobbying Heroes. Hey Kevin, thanks so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's jump into the rapid fire questions. What, in your opinion, is the one myth or misconception about lobbying?
I think there's a misconception about some of, how a lobbyist works and how they operate. Of course, as with any industry, there are good and bad players. But I think generally from what I've seen, and I will also say that I'm new in this field of lobbying, but from what I've seen, most lobbyists are there to, to be a transporter of information and to do it honestly and with integrity to help legislators and decision makers make informed decisions.
What would you be if you weren't a lobbyist?
What would I be if I was not a lobbyist? I would probably still be some sort of manager in the in the energy industry.
What 3 skills you think are essential for someone to be a good lobbyist?
Well, again, with me being a new lobbyist, my take might be a little bit different. But for me personally, honesty and integrity are of utmost importance. And it's because, in my mind, we put a lot of pressure on our legislators and our decision makers. And the pressure is for them to know everything about everything. And so they don't have the time to do the research on everything. And so I think the lobbyist, having the ability to build that relationship and to carry the information honestly, even when it's against their agenda, I think that's important because that is what the legislator needs, and that's what hopefully will bring the legislator back to those lobby conversations.
What is your favorite book or hobby?
My favorite book is that's a tough one. I like As the Crow Flies by Jeffrey Archer. It's a classic rags to riches. Basically, it's a story about starting small, and turning it into a big business, kind of akin to a Walmart. I also like Freakonomics. That was, I think it came out about 20 years ago, but I love that book. It's looking at putting economics and statistics together and asking real questions in a different way.
Yeah, I love Jeffrey Archer too. He's one of my favorite authors. What inspires or motivates you to be doing what you're doing?
I do this because I have a heart of service, and with my broad experience, I like and want to make a difference and a positive difference. And this is my opportunity to do that. And so with what I do, I represent industries and I represent their interests. But in doing so, I'm also representing all of those that are employed by the industries. And so, I normally say, okay, it's about jobs, but I always keep in mind that each job is a family, and it's an opportunity for that family to participate and be a part of the overall American dream.
What was the most momentous thing in your career?
I've had many momentous things. I think one of the most memorable moments was when I used to work for the utility in Virginia, and we had 40% rate increases that I had to communicate to the entire rate base. So I did about 100 presentations in that first year. So, and I had not been a public speaking person or a media person, etc. But one of the first meetings that I went to was actually a Rotary meeting. And it was a Rotary meeting. And there were a lot of bankers and business folks there in that meeting. And the meeting got started, and I had 20 minutes to speak, and everyone was just kind of talking and just a normal thing. But the minute that I said, after my introduction of who I was, and I said, I'm here to tell you about 40% rate increases in your utility bill. Instantly, all eyes were on me. Instantly, everybody sat up straight, straightened their tie, and I had complete 100% attention of everyone in the room. And it was so stark a difference in the attitude. Just that was a memorable moment.
That's pretty true. It's unless something which gets impacted directly to their lives, no one wants to listen. All right, so that's a pretty good rapid fire set of questions and answers. So let's jump into a bit into your past. Let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up, and was there any specific interest in politics when you grew up?
No specific interest in politics when I grew up. I was born and raised in Virginia, so that way far to the north, compared to North Carolina. Obviously, just kidding. Spent my time in Danville and Roanoke, and then also in the Shenandoah Valley. So I still do miss the panoramic mountains, seen from the backyard. Raleigh doesn't quite have that, but Raleigh's a nice place. But no particular things with politics. I think I remember my father taking me to one political rally one time, and I think I grew up knowing who the president was, and that's really about it.
And so once your high school was done, you went to the University of Virginia. What major did you pick?
I was actually pre-med. So, and that's a bit of an interesting story. I came from a science household, so that was influencing that. And again, as I stated, I had a heart of service, wanted to help, make a difference in people's lives. And so I thought, oh, wow, medicine is a great way to do that. No offense to any of the doctors out there, with my next statement, but the more I learned, and I loved, human anatomy and physiology, and I loved, chemistry and the sciences, but the more I learned, about medicine, the more I learned that doctors don't know everything. And so I grew up with that misconception that doctors do know everything. And once that started to sink in, I started to say, well, the path that I'm choosing is surgery. And so I said, I had a faith conflict in that. I said, I don't want to be there and have someone on my operating table and I don't want that to be a life or death decision. I don't feel that that's my decision to make. That's God's decision. And I said, those are some toes that I don't want to step on. So I, stayed in the sciences, but did not go into medicine.
I see. So what did you end up in after you decided you didn't want to be in medicine? Did you finish your bachelor's?
I did finish my bachelor's there, UVA. It's actually a bachelor's in psychology, but it's not psychology, laying on the couch, Freudian. It's more psychobiology before that was a subject, because, I could have chosen biology or could have chosen psychology, but psychobiology, because we were looking at, brain pathways and how the brain encodes and such, more from a biological standpoint, because I was interested, more in neurology than anything else. So my psychology bachelor's degree is not well understood by most.
And that's a pretty interesting background on it. But I mean, like, do you feel like getting that degree has had any impact on your career in terms of whatever you're doing right now in lobbying?
I think having the degree, yes, and I think because I stuck to the sciences, I am, I like the scientific method. I like the logic of science. That to me has been the impactful side of that. And then furthering my education, I did go back, get my master's degree in business, and I enjoy the numbers side of that. Also, worked in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at NC State University. And so, even though I'm not an engineer by degree, a lot of my friends say, think of me as an engineer because of, basically, I say because of the scientific method that I think through logically. So with lobbying, I may be an anomaly in that I'm constantly applying logic to an illogical, nonlinear pathway.
So after you graduated, I know, I see there is from 1993 to 2007. I think 2007 was when you got your MBA. So what were you doing between 1993 and 2007? Were you working somewhere?
Well, when I graduated there, actually I had plans to go into the military, but it was during a time that there was a downturn. I was an Air Force cadet, in ROTC there at UVA. But because of the downturn, they didn't take everybody. They only took the folks that were there on scholarship. So I did not go that route. So after college, I went and stayed with my grandparents, and small town of Danville there, and was there kind of looking after them. Most of their family had moved away, and they needed somebody there, and I needed a place to stay and try to find a start. And so bounced around a little bit in my early careers, but as I did a few different things, smaller time, ran a movie theater, worked in the restaurant industry, until I got into the oil and gas industry. But those early experiences taught me a lot about people, and I also learned a lot about management as I was going through, as a degreed person was going through their management roles and trainings. So everywhere that I had been, I always tried to, one, do my best, but two, see what I can learn with the experience that has been put before me.
Pretty cool, actually. Getting to know other areas before you finally ended up in utilities, right? So you jumped around and then you became the key account manager at Danville Utilities. How did you end up in that position? And you stayed there for about 6 years. So maybe can you talk a little bit about what did you learn in that
field, and it looks like that was the beginning of you getting into utilities. So how did you get into that, and what was it that you learned there?
I think backing up to some of that, I did before the utilities, some of my experience. I did work for a small oil and gas company, and they ran, they had a chain of C-stores, convenience stores and gas stations, and so I learned a lot about that business, and that was one of the first entrances for me thinking about energy, and I liked energy because it helped satisfy some of that scientific curiosity. This is great. You put this stuff in your car and you go, but what's really happening? There's a BTU there. There's a combustion there. There's things going on, and then also, the business side of everything in terms of quantifying it, and then the costs and the cost structures. So all of that. So that led me to the utility side, and so as that opportunity came about, basically Danville Utilities hired me to start and to run their large customer program within that utility. So I set that up and ran that, and so my role basically was to be the customer advocate within the utility. So that was an interesting role that gave me a broad experience, across the organization, because Danville's a municipal utility, the largest municipal utility in Virginia, and they have electric, gas, water, wastewater, and telecommunications. So that in itself is broad, but by my position and role, I reported directly to the CEO. So I cut across all divisions, and so all customers were somewhat on my plate, although I wasn't the customer service director. That was another particular role, and that was more on the billing side. Mine was a unique role. And as I set up the key accounts program, one interesting thing that I did, that looking back, I think was pretty innovative. I took the residential class of customers and as a whole grouped them as one, so they were also a key account. And so with that, I interacted with CEOs of large companies, and I interacted with, as I used to say, the little old lady down the street, and loved that interaction. Would always do it from a helpful tone. Again, that heart of service just comes out naturally. It's part of who I am. And nobody likes to get a utility bill. I admit that, but it's necessary. And so whatever I could do to help, was always appreciated. I did at times have to overcome some initial hostilities that people saw me as the utility guy, but I think I quickly did that. In that community, it got to the point where I couldn't even go to the grocery store without people asking me questions. I was, there wasn't much anonymity there, but I didn't seek the limelight. I didn't, wasn't looking for that kind of notoriety, but it did come about.
And this was Danville, I'm sorry, but is this located in Virginia, or by that time you already moved to North Carolina?
Danville, Virginia, yes.
Okay. And what looks like the next step in your career was that you moved and worked at the NC State University. And can you maybe tell us, how did you get that position, and then what made you move to North Carolina?
Well, what made me move to North Carolina, that's an easy one. I met my wife. She found a Wahoo on Yahoo. the University of Virginia Cavaliers, they unofficially called themselves the Wahoos. And I was on Yahoo Personals, and she was on Yahoo Personals, and that's a whole different story. But so early on, we did the online dating thing, and she was based here in in Raleigh in the Triangle, and I was based there in Danville. So I would drive down on weekends to meet her. And bottom line, the industry that she worked in, the pharmaceutical industry, didn't exist, at that level in Danville. And so I gave my boss a 2-year notice. So I said, look, this is where my family is. And if we can't find something for her here, then I've got to go there. So it actually ended up being about a 2.5-year notice. But so in that time period, we announced that we had 40% rate increases that were coming. We were announcing those increases prior to their onset, which was also innovative. And we were trying to give people and industries and businesses lead time to do whatever they could to mitigate as much as they could, even though we understood they couldn't mitigate the entire 40% increase in their billing. And it created a lot of hardship, and it was a difficult thing to go through, for the utility as well as for the customers. But I was proud to be a part of getting the information out there, getting it out there honestly, and working through that process. But so in doing so, I discovered that NC State had the US DOE funded program called the Industrial Assessment Center. And so I reached out to them. We actually drove halfway, and we met in Hillsboro and discussed the issues that I had. And as I learned about the experience and the expertise that they had, that they brought to the table, it was a great match. And so they actually came up and went through some of our large industrial clients, took a lot of measurements and did a lot of engineering work, and came up with different strategies to help mitigate some of those costs, put together some projects for new mechanical equipment, or et cetera. And again, I really enjoyed the helping part of that to help facilitate that, but I also enjoyed the science behind it. And it was a success for me as well as for the NC State program. And so from there, they recruited me to work with them at NC State, and in some of their parallel programs. And so that's how the transition happened there. And for me, it was great because here I've been on the utility side, looking at the utility operations, the utility business model, et cetera, and all the way up to the meter. And now here was an opportunity for me to learn about everything behind the meter on the other side. So on the customer side, I knew a fair amount about it anyway, but typically the utility doesn't cross that meter threshold. So it was an opportunity that I welcomed to further my learning and understanding of energy. And again, the science of it has always excited me. And so, the science is my passion there, and energy has become, through my long-term career, has become the science of passion of energy. So that answers maybe some additional questions.
No, that's pretty good. And like looking at your work at the NC State, if you had to like summarize it and tell us, like, until this point, you still didn't have any any dive into government relations yet. So was there any skill you gained from all of that experience you've had, working as the program manager, the system director, strategic energy manager, all of that? If you could condense it, can you tell us like maybe one skill which you gathered, which probably is helping you right now in your career as a lobbyist?
Well, first of all, what I'll say that, the program there, it focused on behind the meter systems. And so we optimized for efficiency systems behind the meter. So meeting with high-level people, meeting with CEOs and plant managers and CFOs, et cetera. I think that was a skill that that helped, because you learn what's relevant to them. And that's also, in my current role, having that ability to interact, with that level of management within, the corporate world, and then take and translate what they're wanting and translate that to what the legislator needs, trying to also take some of the complexity of engineering and simplify it into layman's terms. That's one of the skills. I also did learn some about politics just by happenstance. When I was at the utility, because of those large rate increases, a lot of the customer base did reach out to their politicians, and so politicians would call me. They quickly learned that I was a person of, integrity. I would answer their questions and do whatever I could to help their constituent. And so they quickly learned that I was a trusted resource for them, regardless of what side of the political aisle they came from. And so from there, it was interesting. I had politicians, from Richmond as well as from DC, that would call me on my cell phone. And later on, they would ask me about stuff that had nothing to do with energy. I'm going to throw out, they'll ask me, what do you know about corn? Well, I don't know anything about corn, but I know somebody who does. And so I could help connect the dots and put them in touch with someone that could help with, whatever problem that they had. So that was interesting from that. So that really was my first stint in politics. And I realized with that, and with the level of people that were calling me, I had a lot of power and a lot of influence, but everyone also saw that I never abused that, and I never took advantage of that, and completely walked away from it. Wow. When I was there at NC State, as a state employee, you're not supposed to lobby or anything like that. So was a bit insulated through my state career there. But I remember one year we were written out of the budget. Our program was, zero. And I'm like, well, and I was actually going to work towards a PhD to get a degree in engineering and economics, to tie it all together. Never did. And I do blame it on being zeroed out of the budget, because I'm like, I could get my degree, but, or I could work. I need to work to pay for the degree. And so something's out of balance here. So, well, here we go. So went to work with my superiors, and we educated folks on the work that we did and how beneficial it had been to industries across North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, because that was the footprint of that NC State program. So through that process of educating, we said we're a necessity here. We were written back into the budget, at a level that was sustainable. It wasn't at the higher level that it had previously been, which was fine. All we weren't asking for more than we needed. We just, we still wanted to exist and provide benefit to the industries. So that's really where a lot of my first experiences have been, in the political realm.
That's pretty cool. And now you are the executive director at CUCA. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization and what are your responsibilities here?
CUCA is Carolina Utility Customers Association. And we are a nonprofit trade association that represents the industrial interests in North Carolina, focused on energy and energy needs, which for manufacturing is unique. We've been around since 1983, and but we do a lot of work down at the Utilities Commission, because the Utilities Commission takes a lot of their guidance from the General Assembly. We do register as lobbyists, although that is not our primary function. So I'm not down at the legislature lobbying all the time, only when necessary. And then we're also more single issue focused around energy. So my responsibilities are, being the lobby principal, also keeping the organization running, answering to the board, training my staff, and working through and working with the utilities and the Utilities Commission. So that's the long and short of it. But of course, there's a lot more detail on a day-to-day basis. But so maybe an oversimplification. But it has. I've really enjoyed it. I started this January 1st of 2020, and I teased that my predecessor did not tell me anything about this whole COVID stuff starting. So I started. I had about a month in, and then they started talking about the pandemic coming about, and then we've all had an interesting year.
Yes, and can you tell us maybe a little bit about what kind of challenging issues you worked on so far, or what are you looking forward to in this session?
Okay. Well, I'm going to first continue with what I was saying about the uniqueness of energy with the industrial sector. The industrial sector is not homogeneous. You have a lot of different things going on. Everything around us is manufactured in some way. So some things are cut and shaped and molded. Other things are extruded and melted and boiled and heated and pressurized, and and then you've got chemical processes going on, etc. So the diversity of what energy is used for, and taking a raw material and transforming it to a usable product in our everyday life, is quite a bit different than what the residential and commercial business sectors use energy for. Most of our energy in those sectors are used for heating and cooling, some light refrigeration, and lighting. So it's a different thing altogether what we're using energy for, and each operation is so unique that makes the whole industry, the whole energy use within manufacturing unique. And the second part of that is scale. So many people don't have a grasp of the scale. What I've told a lot of folks is it's something that might make an annual difference in a residential bill of about $150 is going to be millions of dollars at a single site at a manufacturing facility. So there's several magnitudes of difference in terms of the scale. One single site for electric delivery may be the same as the same usage as 70,000 households. So we have some manufacturers that, their single site uses enough energy, uses more energy than a small town. And so those are some of the talking points that I try to use to simplify in people's minds so they can understand the scale. So now I might actually need you to repeat the question.
No, that's fine. I think you've really summarized it well as far as like your experience goes. Can you tell, like looking towards the future, right? I mean, so you've had such a long and illustrious career. What is it that you are excited about looking towards the future? And do you have any goals as to, this is what you're aspiring for?
Personal goals are the same goals that I've had starting with the beginning of the conversation. I'd like to make a positive difference, like many of us in the world. And if we're all working towards a positive difference, then positive things are going to happen. But in general, looking at what I'm doing in the energy industry and then with industry and manufacturing, I want to do what I can to help support manufacturing to keep jobs here. But there's a lot of change going on in the energy industry. It's been going on for a while. I've been a part of these conversations for almost 20 years now, and so we're talking about climate and climate change. I don't really take a stance on that because I'm not a climatologist. I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And but I do know that with climate change, folks have determined that carbon reduction is important there. So with that, a lot of folks are looking at renewable energy, and renewable energy is, has changed quite a bit over the last 20 years, mainly in cost. Some changes and enhancements in technology, but also a lot in how it's applied. So, but we also have to think of it in terms of how is it integrated into the entire system, and what are the net benefits and what are the net costs. And from the public view, renewable energy is great and wonderful, but it's not always so. And what I've always said is, let's do what makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, let's not do it, or at least let's not do it, for everybody. Others that want to be early adopters, let the early adopters help drive, the future innovations. And there are a lot of early adopters in industry. So one of the things that we're working on, and I guess this was the question that I missed, our industries again are diverse, and some like biopharma or some of the tech companies, may be more flush with cash, whereas some other manufacturers that are equally energy intense, maybe commodities manufacturers, and so they're operating, with different constraints and thin margins. And so with that, each industry prioritizes things a bit differently. Everyone wants cost and reliability, but where the renewable energy is on their scale differs. And that gets back into my philosophy of let's do what makes sense for each. So let's give the industries the ability, to be the early adopters if they want to, and those that don't and have other priorities, keeping their operations running, let's let them, address these things through their corporate priorities. And so that's really where we are right now, and that starts bringing in a lot of different discussions about, how much renewable can we integrate into the grid? What kind of renewable? What are the costs? Where do we put it? How can we access it? Can we be a part of a market structure where we can access, because we're large consumers, we have bulk bulk power, and we can purchase, and we have the expertise to watch those markets on a daily basis, and thereby release some of the capacity needs and the generation needs of some of the incumbent utilities. So there are lots of different things that are all within there. So what we are seeking as our biggest change to help move the entire industry and industries forward in North Carolina is we're hoping for an organized market in the electric sector. So there's legislation out there right now by Representative Strickland, House Bill 611, I think it is now, and we're very supportive of that. Not to be against the utility. The utilities don't like it. They like the way things are now and the influence and the control that they have now. But again, having been a customer advocate, the customers want to have more control over their costs as well. And so I think there's an opportunity here, and it'll take an education on both sides and an education on the legislative sides and the Utilities Commission to see what we can come to if this is a possibility for North Carolina. Personally, I think that if we do have something like this, it can spur a lot of growth within existing industries. It can bring new industries here. It can also help support the renewable energy industry in and of itself. And I think that it could also solidify a positive future for the utility itself, although there would have to be massive change there, and that's change is always resisted. So it's not as easy as it sounds. I wish it were, but there is the other one of the big opportunities in markets is, as I was talking about, renewable energy. Our industries, they operate around the clock, so they need pardon me, they need power at 3 a.m. in the morning, and if the renewable generation is not providing it at 3 a.m., it has to come from somewhere. So that's the intermittency discussion that also gets there. Batteries aren't yet to the point that it carries us through the entire night at that scale. So, but again, I think through the early adopters, we can continue to push the technology forward, so long as we don't have the full resistance. And I think the market starts bringing in those factors. And if you can have a market that will solve for what makes sense, the market will decide where the price points are and what generation mix works out. And I think that's a non-biased, nonpartisan way that lets math and the market solve for all of many of these political discussions that we end up having. So didn't mean to dive down that rabbit hole, but it also ties into what I would like to see for North Carolina and even the Southeast region. I believe that it's embedded in the way that this country has come about, with looking at the opportunity for competition, and I think it's time that it makes sense now for the electric industry, whereas 20 years ago it didn't quite make sense. And technology's moved forward enough that it's the right time.
Yeah, Kevin, I just wanted to say that the clear passion you have for utilities and energy, there's no doubt in my mind that you will leave a positive impact, not only on your organization, CUCA, but North Carolina as well. Thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've been listening to Kevin's story on the State Lobbying Heroes podcast. This is your host, Deepak. Keep helping and inspiring the public. Take care until next time.